Murder has always been a troubling and very disturbing action, especially to those who witness it or hear of the stories. But in some cases, some murders tend to earn the definition creepy, showing just how disturbing they are considered to be. Murders like these are usually the most troublesome of them all. Welcome back to the Crime Lab channel. In today's video, we'll be looking at the story of the creepy murder that took place in room 1046. The victim of the murder that took place in room 1046 was a man who had given his name as Roland T. Owen, later identified as Artemus Ogletree. Artemus was born in Florida in 1915 as one of 3 children. During his childhood, an accident with some hot grease left a sizable scar on his head above his ear, which remained hairless afterwards. In 1934, he left his family living in Birmingham, Alabama, to hitchhike to California. He updated them on his progress by mail, and they wired him money regularly. Early afternoon of January 2, 1935, Artemus walked into the Hotel President in what is now the Power and Light District of Kansas City, Missouri, and asked for an interior room several floors up, giving his name as Roland T. Owen, and also a Los Angeles address. The hotel staff remembered him as a well-dressed man wearing a dark overcoat. However, he bought no bags. Artemus paid for one night, and the hotel staff noted that in addition to the visible scar on his temple, he had cauliflower ears and concluded he was probably a boxer or professional wrestler. They believed him to be in his early 20s. Randolph Probst, a bellhop, accompanied Artemus up in the elevator to the 10th floor. On the way, Artemus told him that he had spent the previous night at the nearby Mulebach Hotel, but found the $5, which would be $100 today. Nightly rates were too high. The bellhop opened room 1046, which per the guest's request, was on the inside overlooking the hotel's courtyard rather than the street outside. He watched as Artemus took out a hairbrush, comb, and toothpaste from his overcoat pocket, which was all he had packed. Afterward, he left with a bellboy, locking the room and giving Artemus the key. After returning to the lobby, he saw Artemus leave the hotel. A short time afterward, Mary Soptic, one of the hotel maids, returned from a day off to work the afternoon shift. She entered room 1046 and was surprised to find Artemus there, since a woman had been in the room the previous night. She apologized, but he said she could go ahead and clean the room. While she did, she noticed that he had the shades drawn and left only one dim lamp on. This would remain the case when she encountered Artemus in the room on another occasion during his stay. After she had been cleaning for a few minutes, Artemus put his overcoat on and brushed his hair. He then left but asked her to leave the room unlocked, as he was expecting some friends in a few minutes. The hotel maid did as she was asked. At 4 p.m., she returned to the room with freshly laundered towels. Inside, the room was dark. She saw Artemus lying on the bed, fully dressed. Visible in the light from the hallway was a note on his bedside table that read, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The next day, on January 3rd, Mary came back to clean the room and noticed that the door had been locked from the outside and assumed that Artemus wasn't around. But he was sitting inside, again with the lights off, meaning someone else locked the door while Mary was in the room. Artemus answered a phone call and said, "No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. I just had breakfast." Mary came back later to deliver fresh towels and heard 2 male voices. When she knocked, she heard a rough voice say, "Who is it?" When she explained that she had fresh towels, the man said, "We don't need any." During the night, a woman in room 1048 reported hearing loud noises, both male and female, cursing on the same floor, though there was a party going on in the room 1055. The next morning on January 4th, the hotel phone operator noticed that Artemis's hotel room phone had been off the hook for a while without being in use. So she sent the bellboy Randolph upstairs to 1048. Despite the locked door having a "Don't Disturb" sign, Randolph knocked a few times and heard a low voice say, "Come in, turn on the lights." However, the door was locked, and no one was getting up to let him in. So he said, "Put the phone back on the hook," assuming that Artemus was drunk. About an hour and a half later, the phone was still off the hook, and another bellboy, Harold Pike, let himself into the room with a passkey using only the light from the hall. He observed that Artemus was in bed, naked, and seemingly drunk. The phone stand was kicked over, so he fixed it and put the phone back in the receiver. 2 hours later, the phone was once again out of the receiver. They sent Randolph to resolve the situation. He said, "When I entered the room, this man was within 2 feet of the door, on his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I noticed blood on his head. I then turned the lights on. I looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. This frightened me, and I immediately left the room and went downstairs." Artemus was discovered with extensive injuries. He had been tied up with the cord around his neck, wrists, and ankles. It appeared he had been tortured. Blood had even gotten on the wall and ceiling above the bed. He had been hit repeatedly and his skull was fractured. He had also been stabbed in the chest several times. His lung was punctured. There were bruising around his neck that could mean he was strangled. Remarkably, Artemus was somehow still alive, though. One of the detectives asked him about anyone else who had been inside the room. He said nobody, explaining that he fell against the bathtub. After this brief exchange, he was completely unconscious and was taken to the hospital. According to a doctor, the injuries on his body had occurred 6 to 7 hours before being discovered. Detectives found no weapon nor any of his belongings in the room, therefore removing suicide from the equation. 4 fingerprints were found on the phone stand, potentially from a female. He died after midnight on January 5th at the hospital. When Artemus initially checked into the hotel, he mentioned he was from Los Angeles, but Los Angeles authorities could not find any record of him, bringing into question whether that was his real name. His body was placed for viewing at Melody McGilly Funeral Home. As the story spread, more and more people began reaching out to see if their missed loved one could be Artemus, to no avail. Next, police focused on the mysterious Dawn that Owen referred to several times while at the hotel, but the search returned no results. The Journal-Post announced Artemis's burial on March 3rd to be in the Potter's Field. However, Melody McGilly Funeral Home received a call from an anonymous individual who said they would send money necessary to provide for him with a proper funeral. On March 23rd, an anonymous sender delivered money wrapped in a newspaper to the funeral home. Funeral flowers were anonymously arranged with the Rock Flower Company and a card that said, "Love forever, Louise," and it was placed on his grave. In 1936, a friend of Ruby Ogletree found an American weekly piece chronicling the case. Upon looking at the magazine, Ruby identified Artemus as her son, who left Birmingham in 1934. Ruby had received 3 letters from a son in the spring of 1935. However, these letters were typed, which was suspicious because Artemus didn't know how to type. In the early 2000s, Dr. John Horner, the author of an exhaustive account of the murder case published by the Kansas City Public Library, received an out-of-state call about Artemus. The caller claimed to find a box containing newspaper articles about the murder in a deceased elderly person's belongings. According to the caller, there was something else in the box. Unfortunately, the caller did not say what that item was. After that, the case would have no further revelations. The absence of suspects in the case has led to the rise of several theories. There were theories accompanied by telephone calls claiming that Artemus was killed in retaliation for his broken engagement. Organized crime was also considered, since the name Don can also be the title for a mafia boss. Finally, it was suggested that Don killed Artemus for personal reasons, either with the help of the commercial woman. Thank you for watching this video. Hit us up in the comments section and give us a thumbs up if you liked the video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more such videos.